In fact, workers, party members, and hundreds of Chinese reporters were joining the students, including almost 100 from the People's Daily, some chanting, "We print lies. The people have the right to know the truth." Thanks to the efforts of Zhao, some newspapers and TV news stations began reporting that the student democracy movement was the largest patriotic movement in the last 70 years. Others were praising the students for their patriotic enthusiasm. Demonstrations were now taking place in 11 other cities, including over 10,000 students in Shanghai. Hundreds of thousands of Chinese cheered from the sidelines, shouting, "Long live the students." After 50 years of darkness and repression, there was an infective innocence, a youthful enthusiasm, an infectious feeling of jubilation and renewal that was spreading across China. To the chagrin of Li Peng, Yang, and Deng, the democracy movement was becoming a well-organized, highly disciplined movement that was supported by hundreds of thousands of the citizens of Beijing and hundreds of thousands of students and people across China. And Li Peng, Yang, Deng, and the party elders were growing increasingly alarmed. Deng, Yang, and Li Peng began discussing martial law and the need to crush the democracy movement by military force. It was apparent that the students and the people of China had come to a very dangerous belief that they had a right to challenge the decisions of the government. Reporters were demanding the right to tell the truth and to report truthfully on the news. What was next? Freedom? Democracy? Workers and peasants demanding their rights? The possibilities were horrifying. Deng, Yang, and Li Peng felt the people of China needed to be taught a painful lesson, to fear their leaders and to obey. Senior leader Deng Xiaoping was chairman of the military commission and the most powerful man in China. Around May 8th, he began meeting with China's top generals to drum up support for martial law and a military attack on the students and their supporters. To his dismay, Deng discovered that many generals and commanders were not willing to use the People's Liberation Army to attack the Chinese people. The students were also expressing their dismay at the unwillingness of the government to open a dialogue or to retract the April 26th editorial which labeled them terrorists and counter-revolutionaries. As Deng met with his military commanders to plot strategy to use force, the students came up with their own strategy to force the government to take their demands seriously. Student leaders felt they needed to do something dramatic. Some students proposed setting themselves on fire. Instead, they would stage a hunger strike. The concern with food was a central part of Chinese daily life. Tens of millions of Chinese had starved to death during Mao's Great Leap Forward, and food rationing was still part of normal Chinese life. Chinese often greeted each other by asking, "Have you eaten yet?" The hunger strike announced on May 12th captured the attention of the entire nation. Initially, 500 students pledged to take part, donning headbands, identifying them as hunger strikers, some even tying cloth over their mouths to symbolize their refusal to eat. Within days, the hunger strikers numbered in the thousands. Students began to chant, "If we do not speak, who will speak? If we do not act, who will act? If we do not struggle, who will struggle? If we do not fight, who will fight? Our country, our society." Others shouted slogans, "I need food, but I'd rather die without democracy." Compared with people from the West, Chinese people are not as well fed and are quite thin by comparison. Lacking sufficient body fat, students started fainting from hunger the very first day, and the drama of the starving students as they were taken away by ambulance was broadcast live on TV. All across China, the plight of the hunger strikers captured the attention of the young and the old, professionals and peasants, students and workers. People worried about the plight of the students who were willing to starve to death because they so loved their country and their cause. The hunger strike was a brilliant stroke, and they had planned the hunger strike perfectly. Mikhail Gorbachev, the leader of the Soviet Union and the champion of freedom, of glasnost, who was a hero to much of the Western world, was scheduled to visit China in 2 days, and all the world's press would be in Beijing and Tiananmen Square to cover the momentous occasion. Now, thanks to the hunger strikers, the focus of the world will be on the student democracy movement. On Monday, May 15th, the government ordered that Tiananmen Square be cleared as it was to be the official site for the welcoming ceremony for Gorbachev. Instead, the people of Beijing again defied the government, and over 150,000 people crowded the square in support of the students and democracy. Across China, men, women, children, and the aged watched and worried over the health of the students, fearing they would die. The communist leadership was receiving reports of demonstrations in every province in over 145 major Chinese cities in support of the students. The people of China were turning against the government and siding with the students in their demands for free speech, a free press, and democracy. Many reformers were worried. Fearing the government would crush the democracy movement, reformers and renowned intellectuals journeyed to Tiananmen Square, making speeches urging the demonstrators to clear a path for Gorbachev. Some of the student leaders also felt they should clear the square as a sign of their patriotism and love of country. However, most of the students and their supporters felt that the government must first make some concession or agree to meet. Otherwise, to abandon the square and the hunger fast would be viewed as a major defeat. Gorbachev was forced to enter and exit the Great Hall of the People through a side entrance. Li Peng and the right wing of the Communist Party feared and resented everything that Gorbachev stood for. By contrast, Zhao embraced Gorbachev's views on openness, freedom, and democracy. Deng was wary of Gorbachev and his policies, and in fact lectured and warned Gorbachev about the dangers of political and social reform. The people should have the freedom to make money, but not the freedom to challenge or even question the policies of the government. Outside the Great Hall of the People, students and their supporters were calling for the resignation of Peng, Deng, Yang, and other right-wing leaders, demanding that they step down from power. What they hoped is that the conservatives would resign, leaving Zhao and the reformers in power. Zhao and Gorbachev had a lot in common and a lot to talk about. Both were advocates of freedom of speech, openness, accountability, and other democratic principles. Zhao had a long history of championing reform and freedom. During the 1987 Party Congress, Zhao Ziyang was finally able to get the principles of dialogue to become official policy. But he made many enemies who distrusted the concept of openness and who did not trust Zhao or the Chinese people. It was during Zhao's meeting with Gorbachev that Zhao admitted that Deng was in fact in charge of the country and had the final say over all decisions. He explained that Deng, although an advocate of economic reform, was not willing to make social or political reforms and wanted to use the military to crush the democracy movement. Deng was furious at Zhao for letting Gorbachev and the world know that Deng was the man in charge. Deng was even more furious with the students and the people of Beijing. Deng was the supreme leader of China. His meeting with Gorbachev, the supreme leader of the Soviet Union, was to be a grand diplomatic achievement. Instead, the students had embarrassed him and his government on international TV. Deng began to hunger for revenge. The students had made him look foolish, and Zhao made him look inept. Indeed, Deng could not control the people of China, and he could not even control the food in his own mouth.